Hey guys, I'm Adam from TeamElitePhysique.com. Welcome to another episode of Coach Adam's Bikini TV. Today we are doing, by popular demand, positions 5 through 9 of the Arnold Bikini International. I didn't do this originally, I just did the top 4 and everyone said, yeah, I want to see that. We had over 400 requests for it, so I figured, you know what, might as well just go for it. And so let's go ahead and see not just how they place. Everyone knows how they place at this point. I think what's more important to go into is why they placed the way they did and how are they going to move up in the ranks throughout the year. So let's go ahead and dive right into it and take a look at positions 5 through 9. So in 5th place we had Romina, 6th place Ivana, 7th place Ellie, 8th place Yukachi, and 9th place Alessia. So a couple interesting things there. Let's go ahead and jump right into and going from 9 on our way up. So starting off with 9th place, we have Alessia, and Alessia getting in 9th place was a shocker to a lot because she actually won a show in Singapore just a week earlier than this. Now, personally, when I saw her at the show in Singapore, she looked a little bit flat, a little bit small and stringy, not the typical full Alessia that we're used to seeing. And I actually thought that Eureka should have won that show over in Singapore. But she ended up winning that show, and then she came in here in front of the major judges, the Sandys, Tylers, Tamers, and the judges that are aligned with the Olympia, that'll be at the Olympia level, and she actually placed under a pro debut of Yukachi. So I think that if those judges were over in Singapore, the same thing would have happened. She would have placed a little lower and wouldn't have won the Singapore show because she is showing signs of getting just a little bit stringy. And when you see her in her legs specifically, they're very, very conditioned. She was the most conditioned athlete on that stage by far, but also went to the point of conditioning where she got a little bit stringy. And so when you look at her overall shoulders and arms, and just that pop just isn't there in her posing routine. But if you look at her legs when she's doing her posing routine, you can see they're getting really small, really striated and stringy. Her arms are getting really, really small and stringy. And you're even seeing a lot of glute striations in the back pose on a smaller leg. So you could see just the overall tightness in those calves. It could really shows it. Now this is a video, so the video is not going to show as much detail as in person. But you can even see in the hamstrings how tight and how just over the top tight conditioning she is in this one. But it's tight to the point where she's not full. So you can see it in the arms, and then the waistline is not matching. So when you look at a competitor and you're looking at overall balance, you want to have a small waistline, good wide full shoulders. You want to have fullness to the arms and fullness to the legs. And if she filled out her shoulders, arms, and legs a little more, even if she just came with her normal fullness and maybe a little bit more than her normal fullness, maybe put on a little bit of size, she would balance out a lot better. But the problem she's running into right now is that her waistline is a little bit wider and throws off her balance of the rest of her body. So if you look at her shoulders and arms, they just look a little bit smaller in comparison to her waistline in terms of an overall balanced physique when you look at the higher placing athletes. So there's two things she needs to do. One, I actually think there's, I'm obviously the guy that doesn't say people need to take a lot of time off. But in her scenario, I think that she's done a lot of shows over the years. It's starting to show on her. Her legs are getting a little bit smaller. She's getting a little bit stringy. She's qualified for the Olympia. So my opinion is I would say she needs to build up her arms and shoulders and her legs a little bit, not come in with such tight conditioning and come in a little bit fuller next time. And that's going to be what sets her balance where it needs to be. Because she shouldn't be losing to rookies making their pro debut at major shows like the Arnold, winning a show the week prior. But it just shows she just came in a little bit flat, a little bit stringy, and ended up taking the last place at the Arnold, which I'm sure she didn't expect coming from Singapore the week before. So I really hope to see that from her. I hope to see her not do as many shows this year and fill out her frame and fill out her legs and not come in stringy where you're seeing glute striations and the calves being crazy sharp. But that's just what happened at this show. It was very obvious when she came out. I was like, oh, that sucks. She's probably going to be last place here right when she came out. And that's what ended up happening. So you can see here when she's walking, you'll see a lot of striations and a lot of detail in areas where you really don't want to see that much detail on a bikini competitor. Remember, a bikini competitor, you don't want to see a lot of striations. You definitely don't want to see any feathering. So feathering of the glutes where when you're walking, you're seeing a lot of like striations in the glutes and you're seeing all this detail and feathering on her quads and everything. So striations is going to be when the quads separate a little bit here, and feathering is going to be when you have the cross striations. You can actually see the muscle fibers feathers, right? We call it feathering of the quads. You actually see that on her, and it's just way too tight. It's tight by a far margin. So when you're looking at her in the walk, look for these little details. Like look at her calves, those little details you're seeing, and all those striations. It's just way too much for a bikini. So all this detail here, you're seeing all that detail, the sharpness. It's just too hard, too much for a bikini. And it hurts too in terms of your overall size. It's going to hurt you when you're that tight. You're not going to be as big and as muscular when you're that tight. So just a little bit fuller, and honestly a little bit more body fat is going to be helpful for her in achieving that look. But the main thing to look for, especially if you're a competitor, is look for those things when you're doing the step backs. Like look at all that crazy detail. Look at the quads when she's walking, those striations in the quads and that shrink wrapped skin, you know? Great for that'd be like a woman's bodybuilding conditioning level, maybe a woman's physique conditioning level. And even then they would probably say it's a little too much for women's physique. They don't want to see cross striations as much. Now on to pro debut Ukachi, and everyone was saying, how did someone make their pro debut at the Arnold? Well, if you win the Arnold Amateur, you get an auto invite to the pro division the following year. So this year we were lucky enough to win the overall in the amateur division in wellness with one of our coaches, Coach Courtney. So she'll be making her pro debut at the Arnold next year in the wellness division. So that's pretty cool. I can't imagine how much fun this was. I got to talk to her before the show and she was so excited. She's like, I'm just here for the experience. Whatever happens, happens. I'm super excited. And I was like, that's just so awesome that someone gets to do that. And we all get to witness her pro debut on such a mega stage, you know? It's funny because Courtney's doing this too. And I said, Courtney, I hope that you go to the Olympia and you have an awesome career, but even if you don't, like you get to say you did the Arnold, how cool is that? Especially on your pro debut, like even just saying you did the Arnold is just such a cool thing. So such a cool thing that they keep that going, and I think it helps build the amateur show up too, because everyone wants to win the overall there so they can go do it next year. But awesome way to start your pro career. And then what's really crazy is she started her pro career by beating a pro who was an Olympian 2 years in a row and also just won a pro show the week prior. So it tells her that she's going to be competitive right there. Now, first off, when I saw Ukachi, the first thing I thought was, man, she's got a lot of muscle on her, a lot of dense muscle. And I think one of the things that hurts her overall look in bikini, especially when she's next to the Laura Lees, the Ashleys, and when she gets next to even more of the petite girls like the Isas, the Janets, I think what you're going to see where she runs into the issue is like her, when she walks out, you see this core of hers, it is really, really deep with that turtle shell abs that she has. And I think in bikini, you don't want to have deep abs like that in bikini. So what you want to have in bikinis, you want to have a kiss of abs, just a little bit, but you don't want to have, me and Ashley call them speed bump abs, right? So she definitely has those speed bump abs, which gives her a look of a kind of a different division. It kind of looks like she's bordering on being, honestly, from when she walks out, she kind of looks like she's bordering women's physique because she's got a very wide shoulder base. You're seeing strong chest muscles too. You're seeing the pec muscles in the middle kind of have that separation on her. You're seeing the speed bump abs, and she needs to tone all that down to be competitive at a high level in bikini. With this look, I do think she can win some smaller shows where a lot of the top Olympians aren't coming into. But right on initial walkout, right when she walks out, you see the blocky abs, you see the wide shoulders, you see the chest striations. And so you're going to want to just tone it down. Now, when she gets into her pose, it's not that bad. It doesn't look so crazy. But when she's not in her pose and she's doing that initial walkout, you see that, wow, that girl is really muscular. So muscular and dense. So when I'm looking at her from the back though, there is really nothing she needs to work on from the back. Today's bikini is a muscular bikini, right? They're full, they have tie-ins, she's got great tie-ins, there's not any too much detail, there's no separation of her hamstring. From the back, she's golden, right? So I wouldn't change anything at all on her from the back. There's really nothing she needs to change at all. So very complete from the back for a pro debut. Now it's just the walkout. So even in she's doing a back walk here, I would probably get rid of her back walk, not because her back walk's not great, but because her front walk again shows that muscle, right? When she walks forward, you're going to see that muscle again. You see those abs and see that chest. So that would be the thing that I would say would be, let's control the core. Let's bring that down. If she's doing any ab work, I would completely stop that. Start doing some vacuums and some eating right in the off season. She probably is eating right in the off season, but if she's not, making sure that we're having a small waistline in the off season, which is going to help with a small waistline on the in season, and just trying to work on that core area, picking the right exercises that aren't going to make the core any bigger, doing zero ab work, like I said, and just being smart about that. And over the course of the year, that'll tone down a little bit, and just any exercises that include the abs in them, I'll just completely eliminate so we can tone that down. And I think that's how she's going to excel. But I see this physique excelling in maybe another year from now. I don't see her having a top 10 Olympia physique this year because that issue takes a while. The abs, you're always using them. It's going to be hard for you to tone that down. It takes a good while. This is something that Ashley has to be aware of too. If she's doing too much, sure, her abs will get a little bit crazy. We have to be like, whoa, let's change everything and not do any ab work whatsoever. So it's a difficult thing to balance, but it takes time for an athlete to get those down. But I do see her overall frame and her overall physique fitting the capabilities of being a top 10 Olympian eventually. But that's probably a 2-year process for her. Got to get the chest muscles down too. You're seeing a lot of like that separation of the chest. So just exercise selection for her and time is what it's going to take to bring those down. So really, really awesome pro debut. She's a great girl. Hopefully me and her will be friends over the years because she was just super awesome to talk to backstage. So I wish her a ton of luck and hope to see those evolution in her frame. But really cool for her pro debut to beat someone who just came off a pro win. Well, that must have been a nice little feather in the hat for her. So hopefully she does compete this year on a few pro shows. I do think she can win a pro show this year. I think she's going to be in the Sea of 16 at the Olympia until another year when she can tone those things down. It's just going to take her some time, but she's going to be awesome eventually. And next up, taking that 7th spot, we have Ellie Fernandez. Ellie's been a competitor for a long time, very seasoned. I expected her to bring an absolutely complete package to this show, and she actually did. There was, when she walked out, and if you guys look at that walkout again on how she walked out, you can rewind it, look at her tapered waistline and look at her abs and the definition of her abs versus Ukachi, right? There's a pretty striking difference between the two of their abs when they walk out. And what you're wanting in bikini is you want that soft kiss of muscle that Ellie has, and you don't want, again, as we said, those roadblock abs. So Ellie's a really good example of where you want your waistline to be. Very tapered, just a kiss of abs, tapered waistline, very flat, very conditioned, but not over the top. And if you look at her overall fullness and her overall conditioning, I think she absolutely nailed it. So looking at her physique, now she's still doing the old drop back pose, which, you know, I don't know if that really helps her or not. I would probably drop that in her posing routine because when she hits her front pose, it really is an awesome front pose. I mean, honestly, from front to back, she looks really great. I don't think there's a whole lot to work on for her, just more overall size in general. I think she can use just a little bit in her upper medial glute. You could see there's this thing we call fall off where basically you have this part of the glute in the middle being projecting out more and obviously more than the outside medial glute here on this upper outer edge. And if she were to really complete her glutes and get them to be really balanced, because you want balance within the muscle itself too, I think that's going to help her a little bit. And honestly, you see her hamstring, how it's poking here. There's a little bit of separation. I think that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it could be a little bit more roundness without getting her adductors any further. The other thing too, when you look at her overall pose and that back pose, there's not a lot of pop in those rear delts. I think that she can push a little harder on her hands. She can actually put her shoulders just a hair back and get some more rear delts to show, and actually maybe even develop the rear delts just a little bit. But this is someone who's very, very close, doesn't need a lot to make a big difference. You know, she can go from her placing she's going now and jump up a few placings at the Olympia by doing just a few things, and she has enough time to do it. So tiny bit in the rear delt, tiny bit in that glute, tiny bit in the hamstring, and we're talking little bits. I don't think conditioning-wise she needs to do anything. Her conditioning is pretty much exactly where it needs to be. Her fullness looks really good. She filled out right. It's just a little bit more muscle and a little bit of things changing in her posing routine. I really think that the drop back pose where she does that front pose, the kind of the older bikini pose, I don't think that helps her a lot. I don't think it helps her lines. And when she does her back walk, her glutes do flatten out a little bit in that back walk. So again, girls, you don't need to do a back walk. If it doesn't help your glutes, then don't do it. Now, for her, she's the opposite of Yukachi. She looks really great in the front walk though, right? So maybe she should keep it because she gets that awesome front walk. But when you look at her overall pose in that front pose, she looks really, really good. And that's why I think it's so much better than that drop back pose, the old school posing that she does when she comes out. This is so much better that I don't see any reason to do a second best pose. You should only do your first best pose if you're going to be in that front pose. Don't do any pose that's your second best pose. You know why? I don't see the point of it. You're on stage already for over a minute. We don't need you to be that long on stage. You're only doing two poses, your front and back. And these people in bikini are taking, a minute and 20 seconds. It's unnecessary. The judges don't want to see you for that long on stage. When you first come out on stage and you're doing these, you come out from behind the curtain, they see you, they're like, wow. Especially someone with a waistline like hers are like, wow. But then you start posing and walking and posing and walking. At that point, it's just human nature. They're going to start picking out your flaws. They're going to start seeing things that are wrong with your body versus being wow, because it's now becoming regular. You're on stage for over a minute. Now it's regular. So you're seeing posing routines getting shorter because of that. And this is coming from Sandy directly. Sandy said at every meeting she says this. She says, the longer you're on stage, the more flaws I see. Just get up there, do your front and back pose, and get off the stage, and then leave me with that wow factor. I'll be able to compare you next to everyone, but that gives me a good first impression. If you're on stage for too long, I could say, oh, she can work on this, she can work on this. And that comes from Sandy directly. So I see it as a coach all the time, and I'm like, why is she doing the back walk? Why is she doing another front walk? It just hurts her, right? So for her, I'm saying, why is she doing the back walk and why is she doing this drop back pose? I don't think it helps her at all. Might not be hurting her, but it doesn't help her, so why not just get rid of it, shorten up the posing routine, leave the judges with that wow factor right when you come out, because this pose here is amazing. This is a fantastic pose on her. I mean, everything looks really good here. Shoulders, look at that shoulder width. I mean, man, shoulder width, V taper, great arms, nothing crazy. It's right where bikini should be. That waistline, it's full, it's tight, there's a kiss of abs. The legs look full and round. She's definitely put on some muscle on her legs. I mean, everything here looks really good. The ratio, shoulder, waist to hip ratio, the glute profile looks good. Drop that other pose. I mean, this is a really great physique. She did a really good job with this one. So little things for her to make big improvements. And other than that, I think that's it. The other thing I will say too, and this is kind of a nitpicky thing, this is kind of on me, I'm not a fan of these earrings being so big. They're like all the way on her chest here, like on the top of her chest. You don't need such big earrings, you just need a little earring, but don't get anything that's gonna hang on your shoulders and hang on your chest. Get a little bit smaller, more of a more petite earring, because it is a little distracting, I'll say. But other than that, everything else looks really, really good on her. I think she did a great job, so congrats to you, Ellie. And next up, taking 6th place, we have Ivana. Ivana is a good friend of mine. I love her. Ivana, I always want to see her succeed in bikini. A couple things with Ivana. So first off, you know, she's from Spain. They have a different style of posing, a different stage presence. That you'll see a lot more flamboyance with their posing routines than you will in the United States, like a US-based person. You'll see that a lot in the Europeans. Now, when Ivana first came out, the main thing I saw with her, I was like, man, her conditioning is crazy tight, like crazy, crazy tight. So it's not too far. Her conditioning's like right at that limit where the judges would say, you know, they're gonna basically say, don't come any tighter, like it's right on the limit. And that's what I think too, it's like right on the limit, maybe just a little too tight, but not crazy too tight. So if everything is smaller and not so vascular and dense, I think this conditioning would work really good. The problem is that when you look at her vascularity on her arms and on her shoulders and the density and the graininess to the muscle, then it looks over the top. So for someone like her, I would probably come in a little bit softer than having all this, because you see all this detail on the bikini girl, and you don't want to see that much detail on a bikini athlete, that much density, that much separation, that much detail, that much vascularity. Though the conditioning isn't technically over the top, like when we're talking like Alessia, her conditioning was too much. Her conditioning is like bordering on too much. I would be like, if she had less dense muscle, I would be like, that's probably fine, you know. But her muscle's so dense, so grainy, and so hard that her conditioning does look over the top, right? And you can just see it when she walks out, all these details and striations. And you're seeing it especially in the shoulders and arms. You're seeing it in the quads. You're seeing it in a lot of key areas that you don't want to see in bikini. But then when she hits her side pose, it kind of goes away from this area here. When she's walking, you see it. But then in the shoulders, you see it quite a bit, and in the arms, you see that vascularity, and it's hard to not look at if you're a judge, that density, you know? And I think that's what's hurting her here. The other thing that I think is hurting her a little bit too is I'm not a fan of this suit selection. Stick with what's working. If you girls are out there and you're like, hey, I want to change the game up and just be me, and that's what a lot of girls are like, I just want to do it for me and do it for me. Well, there's kind of a recipe to this whole thing. Look at the top 10 at the Olympia. That's the suits you should be picking. Okay, they're one color. They might have some ombre to them, but it's not going to be it's all the same jewel tones, right? They're all similar jewel tones, but they're not having two-tone suits. And I'm not a fan of it. I don't know what the judges' feedback was on it. I don't see this being a thing in the future where judges are like, yeah, start going two-tone, three-tone suits like you see in like figure and women's physique type of thing. In bikinis, it's a different division, you know? So I would say that's something that's not going to help you. So if it's not going to help you, get rid of it, because it might be something that hurts you, and it's definitely not going to help you, so what's the point, right? So I would go with one color suit tone. The suit cut itself, everything is great on the suit itself, but the tone of the suit I'm not a fan of. So I don't think she needs to change a whole lot. I just think it's just the overall density in the shoulders and arms. I do think the arms are getting just a little bit heavy, but from the back, she's awesome. One of the best from the back, actually, in the show. If you look at her overall from the back, and that's the thing, when you see her here, if her conditioning was too tight, you would see more graininess, you'd see more striations like you see in Alessia, right? You saw the crazy detail in the calves if you compared the two, and the crazy detail in the adductors, and when she moves, the graininess in the muscles or in the glutes, the striations in the glutes. But you don't see that with Ivana, so that's why I'm saying her conditioning isn't so crazy. It's more just the appearance of her conditioning looking crazy because the density of those shoulders and arms, and when she's walking in those striations. So from the back, perfect conditioning though. There's nothing you would change there. Fullness to the glutes is great. Rear delts look awesome. V-taper looks really good. So there's really not a whole lot, really, if anything at all from the back I would change. this is pretty much perfect from the back. She's peaked like excellently from the back. Now, from the front again, when you start seeing these quad striations that she has, you start seeing this detail in the shoulders and arms, that's the only thing that she's going to need to control and work on to really move up the ranks at the Olympia. And I think that she was someone who should have been top 10 at the Olympia, or could have been top 10 at the Olympia. So I think she controls those things, works on her posing a little bit, brings a different suit to the Olympia. She's going to be a real contender for that top 10 this year. And then the year after that could probably start climbing the ranks into that top 5 category. So I hope she does, because she's just an awesome girl. I love seeing her. We had a fun time. We were in Tahoe one time. We spent a whole weekend just hanging out with her and her coach, and it was just a fun time. So I wish she does. I hope she gets top 10 this year. But I do think that's a major distraction that the judges are noticing, and kind of everyone's noticing. It's a lot more than everyone else. And when it's a lot more than everyone else, typically it's too much. You never want to be so much more than everyone else. You kind of want to be everything right in the middle for bikini. You don't want to be the best at everything. I don't want to have the best shoulders and arms and vascularity in bikini. Then it becomes too much because you look other than everyone else. So I do think it hurts her. And next up, taking the 5th place spot was Romina. Romina came out and actually was talking to her after judging. And I was like, Romina, this is the best you've ever been. There's very little to say about Romina that isn't just strictly positive. Conditioning was on point. Balance was on point. There is not a whole lot for Romina to work on this. When I was seeing her in those front poses too, the main thing I saw with her is I think she can get her waistline a little bit tighter, but honestly, everything else is really there. I think that her getting, look at that V-taper, it's just crazy. Her doing well at the Olympia this year is going to be no question. Now, let's see if these, being nitpicky here, a couple little things that she can work on. I do think there's just a little bit in that glute medius she can work on in this area here. But look at that V-taper, shoulder to waist ratio. Now, one thing she's going to need to do is control her hair off of her shoulders as well. But man, look at that V-taper, crazy V-taper, great rear delts, good glute fullness. It could be a tiny bit better. Roundness of the hamstring could be a tiny bit better, but nothing crazy. It's pretty close to there. And I think that honestly, I think it's her time to eventually get in that top 5, and I think the one thing that can really help with that is just getting her waistline a tiny bit tighter, getting a tiny bit more detail on those abs like we talked about. I want to see a little bit of detail on those abs. And for her, it's a very flat stomach, but I'm not seeing the real little detail that I want to see, just a tiny bit more than she has there. And I think with that and getting her waistline a little bit smaller throughout the year, doing vacuums and waist training and things like that, that would be all she needs to really even accentuate that V-taper even more, because she's got a beautiful V-taper and a tiny bit of kiss of muscle on those abs, and that's it for her because she looks fantastic. So I doubt the judges are saying much to her about what she needs to improve on, but my key things would be get that waistline a little bit smaller. It's going to make everything else look bigger. Once you get your core, let's say an inch tighter with doing the right exercises, eating, waist training, vacuums, all that stuff, your shoulders naturally look bigger. Your V-taper looks more enhanced. Your legs look a little bit bigger because your waist is smaller, right? So that glutes, a tiny bit in the glutes, tiny bit in the hamstring, and really everything else is where it needs to be. The rear delts a little bit more, and maybe just the slightest bit on the quad, but really very, very good package. I was shocked when I saw her when she came out. I was like, dang, Romina's going to be trouble today. I was like, she might actually move up in the ranks. She looked that good when she came out. She just flowed well. So hats off to Romina. She looked absolutely awesome. So hopefully you guys liked that one. You guys were asking for it. You got it. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do anything else, any of the other shows coming up. I appreciate it so much. TeamElitePhysique.com for worldwide coaching online. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I will talk to you next time.